The number one fear of all of the age groups combined was...
It's the Channel Mom Show with Jenny Dean Schmidt. We're here for you.
Brought to you by the Healthy Marriage Project. Just click on one of their ads to find out about a healthy relationship workshop near you.
Deborah Cody is a fabulous author, very prolific, has written a bunch of books in the middle of playing tennis and having a full-time job. So she's here today with us to talk about her new book, Fear, Faith, and a Fistful of Chocolate. We're so glad to have her. Here's the really cool thing before I get to Deborah. She wants to know what fears women struggle with, moms out there, on a regular basis. So she did a survey to find out what the top 10 fears that women confess to are. And I'm curious if you out there listening today identify with these fears. I certainly do. The top 5 were exactly my top 5, but you wait and see if they're yours. And then we're also going to talk to you about how to deal with those fears. She's got some great techniques to help you, so don't worry about that. She's going to help you. Deborah Cody, the author of Fear, Faith, and a Fistful of Chocolate. Welcome to the Channel Mom Show, Deborah.
Thanks, Jenny. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. So let's get to that top 10 list. First of all, how did you collect it?
Well, I did a survey of 500 random women between 18 and 80, and I got them through mostly online, but a lot of them through my speaking engagements. I'm a speaker. I travel all over the country, and I would pass out my little surveys to my audiences, and the results were quite surprising to me, and I think I was using my own personal fears to gauge what I anticipated seeing from the survey results, and they really weren't what I expected. Interesting that the top 5 were your top 5, and I wonder if people in the audience have maybe thought about theirs during this time we've been anticipating what they are, and hopefully they've identified a few of them. But the number one fear of all of the age groups combined was more than doubled that of the number 2. Okay. So it was head and shoulders above all the other fears of women, and it was loss of a loved one, which included a spouse, child, or parent.
Really? Parents?
Yeah.
Now, do you think that, well, obviously the 80-year-old people probably were not worried about losing their parents, but did you find that was more of a, because I worry more about losing my children, I guess, than my parents.
Exactly. We kind of had a write-in on that one, and so we combined those 3 things into the loss of a loved one, but I'd say by far the loss of a child was the biggest fear of women, definitely.
Yeah, of moms. And that's why every mom's going to be able to identify with this today. Yeah. I think. And by the way, my parents do listen to the show. It's not that I do not value them, love them, but I think more about I think more about losing my kids, and I think every mom does. That's definitely my number one. Definitely. Yes. So go ahead.
2 was fear of a debilitating disease or a terminal illness. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, was more predominant in our older age range. I divided them into 3 age ranges, and the older group, which was from about 65 to 80, that was one of the biggest, because as we crossed that half-century mark in age, I think we began to face the facts that those are in our face. You know, the possibility of debilitating disease and terminal illness just seems more real as you get older. And then fear of failure was number 3, and that was pretty much more in our younger groups, and that makes sense because those are the gals in their 20s and 30s starting out with their jobs and with motherhood, and, they have this deep fear that they're going to produce a bunch of little serial killers instead of children, and that is something to worry about.
Yeah, but let me interrupt you there. When I think of fear of failure, I do probably associate it with career, at least as the world perceives what failure is. I constantly worry about failing my kids, but do you think a lot of the women that were answering your survey were thinking just as much about being a wife and a mom as they were, or even being a single mom, as much as they were thinking about career?
Absolutely, and I think tied into that was fear of failure to ourselves, that we don't live up to our own expectations, or that we fail Papa God in some way.
Yeah.
And those were also commented upon that were included in the fear of failure. So I think there's all kinds of different types of failure that we are looking at there.
So people listed failing God in there?
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. That God would be disappointed with them, and that, et cetera, that they wouldn't be able to go to heaven, perhaps, because they had failed.
Oh.
And different people, their views of heaven and hell, and how you are a success as a Christian or as a person in general.
Yeah. I do think a lot of people live in fear of God, which is which is too bad because, I mean, we're supposed to fear them with a healthy fear, but I think people get that a little bit cattywampus, don't you think?
Oh, I do, and that's one of, actually, I have 5 basic categories of fear that I've placed general fears in so that we could be able to identify them, and one of those is a sovereign fear, and I can talk about that in just a minute, because I think that's very interesting. But then the other, number 4 and number 5 in the survey were actually a tie. And number 4 was old age or senility, and then number 5 was fear of the unknown or the what ifs.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's the one that I struggle with the most. I torture myself at night with all the what ifs. What if that happened? Then, oh no, then that would probably happen, and then this could happen. It really could. It really could.
Yeah.
And I think women get really good at this.
At night. Yes. In the middle of it, that's why there's this verse in Proverbs 31 that talks about the women being up at night. I think that's why they're up at night, most of them, because they're worrying. I mean, seriously, that is 9 times out of 10, I'm getting out of bed because I'm thinking too much and worrying too much, right?
Oh, I hear you. I know. When I turned 52, I asked Papa God to give me more hours in the day to get stuff done, and he sent me menopause, and now I have the whole stinking night, too.
Right. You're getting a lot done. Well, but you know what? Okay, so those top 5 were almost my top 5. I have to say, because as you're listing them, I think, finances, where was that? Because I think a lot of women worry about money.
Yes, they do, and that was written in quite a lot, and I talk about financial, actually that would be included in failure, I think, as well, but I talk about walking through the valley of the financial death, the shadow of financial death, and I have a wonderful chapter on that and a story. My books are all full of lots and lots of personal stories from myself, my own life, and other people who have shared with me graciously their stories so that other people can learn by them. And I think that that's what we do learn from is how other people handle things, failures and successes. And one of the things that the gal, Georgia is her name, in the financial chapter, one of the things she said has just really resonated with me and with a lot of other women I've shared it with. And she talked about things that worked for her, and they're listed there, some things you can do while she was actually way overwhelmed with financial failure. Over a course of about 5 years, her husband was out of work, and she was unable to find a job that would pay the bills. They lost their house. They lost all kinds of things. But she never lost her faith. And she talks about how that happened. And the one thing she said that really stuck with me was, with finances, it is not over until you win. God will help you through that fear, all those fears that come along with financial failure. But it's not over until you win.
And what did she mean by win?
They came out the end with their faith not only intact, but stronger than it was before. And her children never really, she didn't feel that they suffered in the long run for the terrible time they went through, and the times where they didn't have shoes, and the times when they didn't have enough food, and that it showed her God was able to provide for them, even in the worst possible times.
So it's almost like you win when you recognize that you win.
Exactly, because and that's one of the points I make in the book, that so many times our worries are learned. It's a learned thing. It's a learned behavior. We can unlearn it.
That's so true.
The way to do that is to learn how to default to faith.
Yeah, and
default to trust instead of automatically defaulting to fear.
Absolutely. Why don't we let women know what the last 5 were in the top 10 fears? So go ahead.
Six was loneliness.
6 was loneliness.
And number 7, fear of dependency on others.
Okay.
Number 8, 9, and 10 were actually a tie. They were fear of rejection, fear of specific critters, and that would include all snakes, roaches, rats, you name it, all the different critters. And then number 10 was being judged unfairly.
As I said, we don't have a lot of time left in this segment, but I want you to talk about your own fear. I think you've got at least one story about your own fear and why you think women in particular struggle with this, because I think men can just shut it off.
Well, to a point, I think men do fear. They just show it differently.
Okay.
And I feel like that we default to fear when we face anything new or unfamiliar or intimidating because we're leery of things we don't understand. And the bottom line is we're fear of losing control. We clutch onto those things, onto our little bits of control that we perceive that we have, but we don't really. We've never been in control, and we never will be in control. But we are fearful of not being able to control even the small things. And if we allow that fear to continue to wreak havoc in our lives, unimpeded, it can eventually erode our self-esteem and our relationships and even our faith. And that's one of the big points I make in the book, and I share a lot of tools to help us to get over that fear and to unlearn that dreadful habit that we've probably learned from our moms and our grandmoms, because that's all we've ever seen.
That's right. And if my mom's listening, she knows I learned it from her. And I still love her. But yeah, you do learn fear. But I do think that the control thing, I love that you brought that up. And in the overview of your book, you talk about that. I do think that we think if we just fear that maybe it won't happen. It's almost a means of controlling it and thinking, well, if I just fear that the plane's going to go down, then the plane won't go down. I think can't. Do you see what I'm saying? Don't you think we women do that?
Right. That's exactly right. You nailed it. And that's I think that's part of the control issue, that we have to learn to recognize when it's happening, and then learn some tools that will help us then to release that and turn it over to Papa God and see what we can do about it. We can change that. We can.
Yeah. And everyone out there, even if she doesn't identify with the Bible, or if she says that she doesn't know where she is with faith, I think the surveys show that between 90 and 95% of all people say they have faith in God. Some of them can't extrapolate from there. You and I obviously lean on our Christian faith, and we're going to talk about some ways in which people can do that in terms of techniques coming up, and just how to let go of fear, because my goodness, it's a killer, literally. Don't you think? Don't you think people can get diseases? It's proven, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Plenty of studies point right to that. It is very, very true. And fear's not a bad thing. The way it was intended was for our good, to serve a useful purpose, to motivate us, move us forward, keep us from making mistakes. And sometimes fear saves us from ourselves. I mean, how often would we have had squashing our bosom buddies flat with mammograms without the possibility of that frightening C word invading our bodies?
Right.
I mean, fear can be healthy, and it should be. It's just when it begins to change our behavior and control our way of thinking, that's when it becomes debilitating.
Yeah, and you're going to help us rein that in the next segment. We're coming back with Deborah Cody, the author of Fear, Faith, and a Fistful of Chocolate.